So my talk is on blockchains. So what this wallet program, this is called wallet programs, these are all wallet programs. These are wallets that you keep in which your Bitcoin basically, I mean, there is no Bitcoin there, but there is an account somewhere. Your program wallet keeps track of how many Bitcoins you own and what names have you used for owning them. That's another interesting thing, is that you don't use your real name, you just use a number, and you generate that random number randomly. Okay? So with this random number, I own 1 coin. With that random number, I use 2 coins, and so on and so forth, and I can pay 3 coins to somebody. So nobody can really know what number belongs to them, whom. But every number is associated with a private key and public key. So those of you who know cryptography know that there is a system of keys that if you encrypt something with private key, you can decrypt it with public key. If you encrypt with the public key, you can decrypt with private key. Right? They are dual. And that's how we sign the documents. We sign it with private key, but anybody can verify the signature in a second with my public key, which everybody knows. Right? So it will generate a public key for you, it will generate a private key for you. The public key is hashed to a small number, which is your address, they call it, and that's your name. That's all. Your name is not whatever it is. So now I can give you some money, or you can give it to somebody else, and it's very difficult to trace where it is coming from, although it is easy to trace in the sense that somewhere the Bitcoin is going to come from a dollar. Wherever there is a boundary to the physical world, you have to give your name. So when you give somebody $1 and say, give me 1 Bitcoin, they will ask you what is your name, what is your credit card number, where you live, and that is the point you lose. But after that boundary, the Bitcoin travels totally anonymously. And so this wallet program will do all that for you. So you don't have to be a cryptographer to use it. So let's say Bob says, I bought this 1 BTC to Alice. So first he puts a pointer to the previous BTC. So he says that I got this BTC in one transaction whose hash is this value. So it is not a real number or anything like that. This pointer, all the pointers in this world are basically the hashes. So when I say I point to that transaction, so we have to find that transaction and hash it and see, yeah, this matches this, then yeah, that is the transaction I was pointing to. And this is my public key, and this is the address of Alice. This is who I want to give. Now address is the hash of the public key, right? So this is public key of the recipient. Now whole thing is hashed, and then that hash is signed with the private key. So now this is recorded that nobody else can do this thing because your signature is there. So it can be proven that you gave 1 BTC. And now we have to make sure that you did have that BTC. So we will have to check the previous hash and all that, right? And now when Alice wants to spend that 1 BTC, she will have to do the same thing. She will have to point to this transaction saying that this is where I got that 1 BTC. And so there is a ledger, a book which is kept where in the banks they keep it, and in our home we keep it, where we write down that I gave $1 to Alice, or Bob gave $1 to Alice, and then in my case I write down that I put $2 for the grocery, and I put $3 I got electronics return. That is a ledger, right? Everybody has it. The main thing here is that this ledger is replicated all over the world, and there is only one ledger. So all the transactions of the world are replicated in this ledger, and this ledger is replicated at millions of nodes. Now you would think that is impossible, right? How can you take all the transactions of the world and replicate them all over the world? It was impossible 5 years ago, but today, if you put all the transactions in one place, in Bitcoin at least, it is 9 gigabyte. And I have 9 gigabyte, multiple times of that in my iPhone, right? You have terabytes. I have actually terabyte in my pocket over there. 4 terabytes, small disk. So storage is no problem, right? So the whole world transaction can be replicated infinite times and still be no problem. So this ledger, which is actually kept right now in a bank, and therefore it can be hacked, now it is kept in multiple copies all over the world, and so it cannot be hacked. Now these transactions are linked, so this is a transaction chain. However, it is too much to deal with the transactions individually. So what we do is we put them in a block. So we take maybe hundreds of transactions and put them into a block, and then we take another 100 and put them into a block. So the blockchain, we found a blockchain rather than a transaction chain. Because now the blocks are easy to handle because basically there are lots of transactions, first of all, and they are all verified. So everybody who had seen those transactions before has verified that the signature is valid, that this guy has a private key, and so on and so forth. So these are all valid transactions, and they are just chained. And the chain is single, as I said, only points to the backwards. And again, all the pointers are simply the hash. So basically, the hash of this block, n-1, is the value which is in this block. Now the blockchains make the miners ensure that all transactions in the block are valid. So the miners, who are the miners? The miners are the people, and you can be a miner. You don't have to go to somewhere and fill out a form that I want to be a miner. You can just become a miner tomorrow. You have a computer, you can say I want to be a miner. You take all the transactions that are coming to you, verify them, put that into a block, and say here is the block. Okay, so the miners are people that we don't know. They're all over the world. And the thing is that the miner who is the fastest, who has the most computing power, wins. Okay? And it is not always the same person who wins, because this thing that they have to solve is random. And even if I have the same computer as you have, sometimes you will win, sometimes I will win. So the probability of one person winning all the time is very low. And the miner is rewarded, and that's how everybody mines, is that the person who wins first and whose transaction is the first, who comes out first with the block, he gets few bitcoins, and that is why we call it mint. So that is how the bitcoins are generated, is that people who are mining, they get rewarded by allowing them to print new money a little bit, not too much. And there is a limit for that as well. You cannot just print $1 billion bill. You can just, there is an amount as to how much you can mint today. And how much, so the amount, basically depends upon the time. Everybody knows how much is that amount. When you send it to some place, your block, they will all check it out that you didn't lie anywhere. That you solved the puzzle correctly, that you put the correct amount, that every transaction is valid, and so on and so forth. So your results are checked by lots of miners and lots of nodes. The chain at some point looks like this. It doesn't look like a single chain, because this block was generated by somebody and they were pointing to the same block as this person was pointing to, and similarly this was pointing to that block. So towards the end, the chain may not be single. Basically it becomes a fork kind of thing. But what will happen is only the blocks that have the highest difficulty will win. And so if this block had solved the puzzle which was highest, will win, and these two will lose. And so eventually this is the chain which will survive. And if you have survived 6 blocks in the chain, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, everybody who is in this block, they can spend the money. If you are not in the 6th block, then you have to wait a little bit, because we are not sure. Right? Each block takes exactly 10 minutes. So 6th block is 1 hour. So if you get the money, you can spend it after an hour. And you can spend it right away, but basically it cannot be verified, and your transaction will be delayed. But anyway, so the idea is that as the transactions which are older and older, they are very well verified and very well done, and they are stored everywhere, and you are in solid grounds. The transactions which are here, there is some confusion and question about them. And all this timing, all these numbers were all done by this one guy, Satoshi Nakamoto. He thought about everything, 10 minutes, this, that, and so on. Now here is a trick he came up with, that each transaction does not really have that I want to give to Alice. It could be that I want to give to Alice, but he said no, I want to give to this thing which could be a program. So you write a program, I want to give to this program. So you execute that program, and whatever the result comes out gets that money. So there is a script, there is a program that is written for the output. And similarly, when you spend the money, you have to give a program that really compares and matches with that output script. So you give an input script that verifies, yeah, that I am. So basically, it could be very simple script. It says, I want to give it to Alice, basically a number, and then the Alice supplies the private key, and somehow you can and she won't give you a private key, but she would give you a proof that she has the private key to that address, and she can use the money. So that is the simplest script, but it doesn't have to be that simple. So you can pay to a public address hash, and there are more complicated scripts. For example, one script could be multi-signature. So there are 5 people in the bank, in the company. 2 of them, if they sign it, then the script is valid. So if you provide 2 signatures, you get the money. And this is very common in the banking business. One signature will not do. You could we already talked about pay to script hash. However, when Nakamoto designed this thing, he put a restriction. He says that these programs cannot be Turing complete. What is Turing complete? Every program that we generally, for simple reason, I'm just going to simplify here, is Turing complete because you can go back and forth, you can have jumps, and you can have while and do loops. But he said, no, we cannot have do loops, we cannot have any loops, we cannot have any jumps, so it has to just execute straight because all these miners have to execute it. We don't want them to get into a loop forever. So he excluded loops. So this is Turing incomplete. So everything cannot be represented with this program. So somebody came up with the idea that why don't we allow people to write Turing complete programs? When that idea came, then suddenly the blockchain became very, very interesting. Because now you can write any contract, and every contract can be written as a program, and you can write any contract, and it might take longer because of this while, this and that. So here it is. I want to give to Alice $100 if IBM stock goes below 5. I just want to bet $100 to Alice. Okay? So someday Alice provides a proof that the stock today is $5, less than $5, she gets the money. This kind of a script can be written very easily. And unlocking script is simple. Property exchanges can happen. If the building is complete, then they get the payment, whatever they were due. If the building is not complete, the payment doesn't go to them. You would like that, right? If the building is 80% complete, they get 80% payment, 20% is still held up. So these kinds of contracts you can write. And so now we have something called smart contracts. Contracts that the machines can handle by themselves. You don't have to go to the court, you don't have to go to anybody. All the miners, everybody knows that the money is not theirs because the script has not been provided. And so now we have smart contracts, smart properties, smart everything. Now the smartness definition has changed. A few years ago I told you smartness was networking. Now the smartness of that you are working on the blockchains.